Everything that has ever broken you had one thing in common. You gave it access. The person whose words dismantled your morning. The outcome whose failure collapsed your confidence. The opinion you did not ask for that lived in your head for 3 days. None of it had power you did not hand over. And the most dangerous thing about this, the thing that keeps the pattern running, is that the handing over is invisible. You do not feel yourself giving away the keys to your own interior. It happens before you decide, before you even know a decision was available. The Stoics identified this as the central problem of human existence. Not circumstance, not other people, not the chaos of the world. The ungoverned interior, the mind that can be entered by anything, and the complete, precise, daily practice they built to seal it. Neuroscientist Dr. Joseph LeDoux at New York University spent decades mapping what he called the emotional brain, the specific neural pathway through which external stimuli bypass rational thought entirely and trigger an immediate response. His finding was precise. The brain processes threat, real or perceived, through the amygdala before the prefrontal cortex has had time to assess whether the threat is genuine. You react before you decide. Every time, unless you have built something between the stimulus and the response. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, writing from inside a Nazi concentration camp, a man who had lost everything the world said mattered, called that something the last of human freedoms. The space between stimulus and response, the ability to choose. He observed men around him who, despite identical external conditions, maintained their interior completely, and men who, despite nothing being materially different from their neighbors, had collapsed entirely from within. The external world was the same. The interior was not. History confirms this at its most extreme. Emperor Nero, who had every resource, every comfort, every power available, was reported by multiple historians to have been in a state of perpetual internal chaos. He could not be insulted without erupting, could not be challenged without destroying, could not face uncertainty without collapse. The most externally powerful man in the ancient world was completely internally ungoverned. His advisor, Seneca, watched this from close proximity, documented it, and built the precise counter-philosophy from inside the most dangerous court in Roman history. Seneca served as advisor to Nero for 8 years. To be clear about what that means, Nero was the emperor who executed his own mother, who killed his first wife, who burned Rome and blamed the Christians, who would eventually order Seneca himself to commit suicide. Seneca operated in that environment for 8 years, surrounded daily by a man who was a living demonstration of what an ungoverned interior does to a human being. And what Seneca built in response, the philosophy he wrote in letters, in essays, in private correspondence, was not academic. It was survival. He wrote, and this is the line that carries the entire architecture of detachment: we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. He was not writing comfort. He was making a diagnosis. The suffering is not in the event. It is in what the ungoverned interior does with the event, the story it builds, the meaning it assigns, the permission it gives the external world to determine the internal weather. He also wrote, and this is the operational instruction: it is not the man who has little who is poor, but the man who craves more. He was not talking about money. He was talking about the man whose peace is perpetually contingent, always dependent on something outside of him arriving in a specific way before he is permitted to be settled. That contingency is the crack through which everything enters. The moment your peace depends on an outcome, on someone's response, on the world's cooperation, you have handed the world a lever inside your own interior. Marcus Aurelius understood this at the same level. He wrote, from the same court, watching the same patterns, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Not comfort, strength. The specific, built, practiced strength of a man who has sealed the interior, who has made the decision that nothing enters without his permission, and who has then held that decision against every daily provocation the most powerful office in the ancient world can generate. So why does the interior stay open? Why do people who can feel every intrusion costing them, who know the pattern, who have studied it, who have promised themselves that next time will be different. Still hand the keys over the moment the next provocation arrives. 3 mechanisms, running simultaneously. The first, reaction has been confused with authenticity. There is a story operating beneath the surface of most people's emotional lives. That the depth of your feeling is proven by the immediacy of your response. That to feel something fully means to discharge it immediately. That restraint is suppression. That the space between stimulus and response is distance, not governance. This is false, and the Stoics named it with precision that modern neuroscience has since confirmed. The space between stimulus and response is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of choice. Seneca felt everything. He documented rage, grief, fear, all of it, fully, in his writing. What he refused to do was let any of it convert automatically into action that was not chosen. He felt. He processed. He decided. That sequence, feel, process, decide, is the entire practice. And it is a practice, not a personality trait, not a talent, a built, daily, repeated skill. The second, the interior has never been deliberately sealed. Most people have never made the decision, not the intention, not the aspiration, not the resolution that follows a particularly expensive hijack. The decision, the specific, clear, pre-made commitment. This is my interior. Nothing enters it without my permission. Not their words. Not this outcome. Not this circumstance. Not this person's opinion. Without that decision made in advance, made in the calm, before the storm, the interior has no gate. Everything that arrives, enters. And the world will always provide something designed to enter. I want you to go back to the last time something got to you. Not the dramatic moment. The ordinary one. The comment that changed your morning. The message that sat in your chest for hours afterward. The situation that replayed in your mind on a loop long after it was over. Walk through it slowly. In that moment. Before you reacted, before the feeling converted into response. Was there a fraction of a second where you felt it coming? Where something registered? Not yet the full reaction, just the first edge of it, and you were briefly, barely, aware that a choice existed. That fraction of a second is the most important territory in your life. It is the gap Seneca described, the space Frankl identified as the last human freedom. The question is not whether the gap exists. It always exists. The question is whether you have built anything inside it. Any practice, any pre-made decision, any structure that allows you to use it rather than simply pass through it on the way to the automatic response. The third, and the one that requires the most honesty to examine. Most people keep the interior ungoverned because the alternative requires them to relinquish the one thing the ungoverned interior provides. The justification. An interior that reacts to everything is an interior that can always explain why things are not moving, why the peace hasn't arrived, why the work is not being done, why the version of themselves they have been promising keeps being deferred. The world keeps providing material, and the ungoverned interior keeps consuming it. And as long as the consumption continues, as long as something outside is always responsible for the interior's condition, the decision to govern it never has to be made. Seneca named this pattern in the sharpest language available to him. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. Not in the obvious ways. In the accumulated, invisible, never-noticed hours spent letting things in that were never going to give anything back. Here is what you actually build. Not a mindset. Not a philosophy. A daily practice. Starting tonight. Practice 1. Make the decision. Tonight, before you sleep, write one sentence. My interior is mine. Nothing enters without my permission. Not as affirmation. As a decision. Written down. Specific. Real. This is the gate being named. The first act of sealing it is the acknowledgement that it exists, and that closing it is a choice you are making tonight. Practice 2. Install the gap. Tomorrow, in one interaction where you feel the reaction forming. Pause. One breath. Deliberate. Before the response. Not to suppress. To choose. In that breath, one question. Does my response right now serve me? Or does it serve the reaction they were waiting for? If the second, nothing. Or something chosen. Never something automatic. Marcus practiced this in the most provocative court in the ancient world. He called it the discipline of assent, deciding what the mind agrees to act on. You have considerably less provocation than Marcus had. Use the gap he used. Practice 3. Audit what you are letting in. Tonight, before the phone, before any external input, write down 3 things that received your interior attention today that did not deserve it. Not the important things. The ones that got in anyway. The comment. The outcome you monitored obsessively. The opinion you did not ask for that lived in your head for hours. Write them. Name them. Then write 1 sentence. This did not deserve access. Tomorrow, it does not get it. Practice 4. Practice deliberate solitude. 10 minutes tomorrow morning. Before anything external. No phone. No news. No input. Sit with your own interior. Not to meditate. To make the interior familiar. To prove to yourself that it is a safe and sufficient place to inhabit without constant external input. The person who is comfortable in their own interior does not need the world's noise to avoid it. And the person who does not need the noise cannot be controlled by whoever generates it. Practice 5. Identify 1 attachment and examine it. Tonight, name 1 thing outside of you whose presence or absence is currently determining the condition of your interior. A person's response, an outcome, a result you are waiting for. And ask honestly, is my peace conditional on this? If yes, that conditionality is an open gate, and the world knows exactly how to walk through it. You came into this video ungoverned, not consciously, by default, operating an interior that everything could enter, every comment, every outcome, every opinion of every person who showed up with something sharp enough, and handing it access before you had made any decision to give it. Seneca watched the most powerful man on earth, Emperor Nero, destroy himself not through enemy action, not through military defeat, not through political failure, through an ungoverned interior that could be entered by anything and had no gate. He built his entire philosophy as the answer to that observation, not from a place of peace, from inside the most volatile court in Roman history. He wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The suffering is not in the event. It is in what the ungoverned interior does with the event. And the governed interior, the one that has a gate, a decision, a practiced daily discipline, processes the same event and does not suffer. Not because it feels less, because it chose what to let through. Here is what changes when you govern the interior. The world does not stop being chaotic. People do not stop saying things designed to breach you. Circumstances do not become predictable or fair or cooperative. None of that changes. What changes is this. None of it reaches you without your permission. And that single distinction between a life lived at the mercy of whatever arrives and a life lived from a governed interior that decides what enters is the difference between a man who is broken by the world and a man the world cannot break. Not because he is untouched, because he is untouchable. Build the gate. Govern the interior. Let nothing in that does not deserve it. And discover what has always been true, that the most unshakable thing in any room is the man who cannot be moved without his own permission. Subscribe to the inner Citadel. This is where the governed interior is built, 1 practice at a time, for the people who have decided to become untouchable. I'll see you in the next one.